Oh, shoot.
Are you there?
How's it going?
Holy shit, look at your hair.
Yes.
It ain't what it was. It looks awesome. Look at that.
Thanks a lot.
I interviewed you in
Yeah.
2012.
Occasionally, I do feel like an observer to my own life, and I'm just sitting here, all this shit's happening, like right now. How the hell did I get here? I'm in a studio. Where, where am I? It's like I just woke up from a dream.
So this is David, 12 years, post a lot of the stuff on our channel.
Incredible. I've ended up back there a few times,
Mhm.
looking through a few of them and just seeing the comments and just being astounded that not only people are still watching these things, but they're taking something from it, And I'm not somebody who would talk to most of these people. Let's say if I met them in person and say, oh, things get better, because I think for most people they don't, you know. If you're somebody who has a difficult background and you're struggling with mental health crises, there's not really a lot working for you in the system. And unless you have existing privileges already, you're probably going to struggle.
Mhm.
But I think I was lucky at a few points, and that's why I can even stand here today and want to do this with you. And I have to have
Mhm.
some gratitude for all those things and what they've allowed me to do in this life, which I never thought I would do. I mean, I never thought I'd be married for one. So,
Get the fuck. Is this the same woman you were with like a little over a year ago?
yeah, yeah, we've
Yeah,
been
I
together.
assumed so.
She's very special. I haven't met someone quite like her in my time on this planet.
That's beautiful. I think it would be important to give a little background on from whence you come, where you are today. That's very general,
Mhm.
but you do come from a messy family.
Yeah, and
So, and you did not have a lot of leg ups in that regard. So maybe paint that picture for people.
I have to look back at that time period and really wonder what it might have been like if you were able to get into my house and record there. And I remember at that time, my mother was the one shutting that down because I think even more so than just, a three-letter diagnosis, that house was where I became what I was.
Mhm.
And there's just so much about that trauma and what I experienced at the hands of my parents that made me into that person. And really gave me things I'm still struggling with today, and
Can I stop you for 1 second because
sure.
I have an image in my head. I want to just have you explain to people. Like I have the image of your mother yelling at
Mm,
your father because you sent me a video you had taken,
yeah,
and your father is somewhat infirm even then,
yes.
and just this repetitive verbal lashing on someone who clearly doesn't have the capacity to respond, almost literally respond. And so you're bearing witness to this. You're the son of the person getting attacked.
Hmm.
And then it was you and your brother
That's
who
right.
like probably held on to each other for dear life because that was like some level of love and sanity in comparison.
When I was in therapy myself, I described our family environment as a minefield that you had to sort of tiptoe through.
Exactly. But there almost was no tiptoeing, was there? Because you're fucked either way.
Too many
Can I
minds.
curse?
I look at it almost as a kind of trauma bonding now,
Hmm?
honestly. Then I wasn't really conscious of it because he and I, it's all we had. We didn't have any other family who was involved. But how I reacted to my father receiving that treatment, well, back then I was always baffled that he didn't stand up for himself, that he didn't stand up for us, and worse, that when there was abuse, when there were fights, he oftentimes would just take the side of my mother and kind of serve as her henchman in a manner of speaking. So I had a lot of anger toward him,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of resentment, a lot of sorrow that I didn't have this father I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something I held on to even to when I to witness him die in a hospital bed. Is all those times where I could have used a father, I didn't have one. I mean, there's more context, of course, over the past 6 years, which I could get into if you'd like.
I think it'd be interesting to hear how you got out of the house because I
Mm.
can only imagine when I saw a video of it, how confining was it confined? I mean, was there any piece of you that didn't want to leave? Or was it just trying to figure out a way out?
You know, those stories of somebody who's in a narcissistic relationship and they come to confuse all the pain and fear with their partner being loving.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's kind of like that. It's all I knew. I didn't really have anything outside of it. But I was so naive. I didn't understand that things could be different, that people could be different.
Mm-hmm.
Because all most of my life was just experiencing that terribleness, that chaos, that fear. And it came to define me. You know, that person that came to you was defined by that chaos and that anger. And it's clear I internalized all that crap. I let it eat me alive.
Like, would your mother hold you back from leaving and you viewed that as love
Oh,
versus, okay.
oh, oh, absolutely. And to quote therapist my brother used to see, it's also the devil you know, that there's comfort in what you know, especially when you grow up with a person like that that spends literally years telling you, oh, people are bad, the world out there is scary and dangerous, you can't trust anyone. You know, when you're growing up around that, you really it sinks into you. You become fearful. And the thing I realized since then is it was never about really anything she was talking about. It was her desire for control, you know, and isolating my brother and I was part of how she kept that control. I remember when we actually moved out for the first time in 2014, she literally chased us down the hallway screaming as we had movers trying to move our things. She did not want to let go.
Wow.
And I can even talk about how I ended up living with her 2 years later. It's just,
Right. Because you guys moved. Yeah, go ahead. Because I remember I filmed you when you and your brother moved to Brooklyn. I have that footage.
oh,
And I have
wow.
a call with you and your mother on the phone where she's talking about like those clouds in the sky and they're like some paranoid vision of what they were. So it was after that that you ended up having to move back with her or choosing to move back with her.
There was a long, long history of her using finances as a manipulation tactic. And the way she'd raised us was in a way that essentially handicapped us in adult life. She used to write me messages constantly, like, you don't have to work or be a wage slave. Like, we have enough money to get a place together. Let's do this. And just this very almost emotionally incestuous messaging she'd be barraging me with even after I moved out. I was struggling with work. I burned out very easily. I was very sensitive. I struggled with the 9 to 5 office shtick and taking constructive feedback. And, you know, that has remained a struggle in my life because of what she exposed me to. I did not feel like I was adequately prepared to participate in this world. And I'm not I'm not going to turn around and say, oh, it's all her fault. Because, you know, I've held down my current job almost 3 years now. It's the longest time I've been able to hold down a good career paying job. And, but I will say, like, those seeds of discontent that they're still there and there's still things I have to struggle with on a daily basis.
So can you give an example of a seed of discontent that you identify in present day that is a remnant of the before?
I feel like I have a bit of an anti-authoritarian vibe, especially when I perceive that a boss is being especially unfair or overly personal in a way that is, you know, derogatory. I'll get very reactive, and it takes everything I have to not, you know, speak out of turn. Thankfully, I've been in this, you know, very artificial corporate space for long enough that I feel like I've gotten better at kind of just deflecting and not like getting triggered by it, but it can still be a struggle some days. I'm very easily set off when I perceive I'm being treated unfairly. And I know that's from what I grew up with and not being able to stomach that, not wanting to stomach it.
But you had to stomach it, right, when you were young?
Well, you know, that's kind of the tragedy of it is for so long, I didn't know.
You didn't
And
know what you didn't know.
I didn't understand the the level of the abuse that I was experiencing. And I didn't understand how much it was damaging me.
I see.
So
Yeah.
perspectives I have now around who she was as a person and the kind of tactics she employed to diminish and control myself and my brother, I just didn't know back then. Everything just, it sank in. I internalized it. And I became somebody who, as a result, had horrible self-esteem, terrible body image, very little confidence. And, my brother's suffering a different aspect of it even today. I mean, narcissistic abuse is no joke. But back then, if we're talking about the four F's of trauma response, my brother,
What are the four F's?
fight, fawn, freeze, and flight. So fight is what my brother would engage in with her. They've gotten so many shouting matches, things would be getting flown across the apartment. Um, I was more of a freeze flight actually with her because I saw that and I realized there was no winning with her. And she could always be more violent than you could be. So I kind of just would shut down and internalize, or I would try to get away if I could. And then you have Fawn, of course. That was more my father. He kind of went down that alley and it had disastrous consequences. But
It had disastrous consequences because she advantaged herself of that.
This is a man who probably was on the spectrum, had a lot of social difficulty. And how did this end? She abused and neglected him so badly that it resulted in criminal charges for her when I reported it. And, he ended up dying prematurely because of her treatment. So that's what you get when you bow down to a narcissist and you don't.
I'm gonna stop you for 1 second because we do a lot of stuff on our channel about narcissism, and we actually don't. Because I'm not saying she is or isn't, or she probably is, but we are careful about using the term narcissist
Mm-hmm.
to be an equivalent with someone who is a shitty human being behaving in shitty ways, because it's not necessarily the same thing. And people use the word narcissist these days a lot as like code for an asshole.
You're right about that. That term has definitely gotten a lot of popular gravitas in the past couple of years. But I wrote you about this book actually by Christine Lawson, Understanding the Borderline Mother. She actually fits the criteria for a witch mother just completely. With my last partner and with my brother's last partner, this is somebody who would go to them and say, oh, they're going to abuse you eventually. They're going to beat you. She told that to them. My brother and I are very pacifistic. We are not violent people. Or she'd come to us and say, oh, they're going to get fat and old and you're going to dump them. And this is somebody with so much vitriol and
Well, it seems like she was just trying to break you apart.
Yeah, and that kind of like triangulation is so much part of the way she always was. Just she's incredibly possessive, and in a way that again almost feels emotionally incestuous. Because anytime we get a partner, there would be attempts to stop us from being with them. I mean, outside of that is just the delusionality that she displayed during that whole time period. And this is somebody who in 2001, after 9/11 happened, was microwaving our mail because she was scared about anthrax. She has displayed this kind of paranoid ideology for the whole time I've known her. It's just gotten worse over the years. I have messages and audio recordings of her from when things were kind of blowing up in 2020, where she's calling me these horrible things, calling me a pervert, a faggot, saying I'm autistic. Just, I've never heard these kinds of insults from anybody in my life. And this is coming from my mother, for Christ's sakes. And in the wake of everything that happened, she's accusing me of trying to murder her and that the FBI are looking for me. And it just, mind you, I reported her doings to the police. I didn't throw her out. I didn't persecute her with law. these are her framings of all these things. She's always made out to be the victim, and she engages in what's called DARVA, where she reverses the victim and the offender. She's done this since I was young, and
Say it again.
it's called DARVA: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. So I'll give you an example of this with her. Um, so with what happened with my father, where she was abusing and neglecting him, she denies it. Says, "Oh no, I wasn't doing that." And then she goes on to attacking. So she says, "Oh, but you weren't doing this or this or this." And then she reverses the victim and offender, where I'm the bad guy because I brought this to the attention of authorities. She's made out to be the victim,
Right.
and I'm made out to be the offender.
Got it. Yes.
And the thing is, I didn't know anything about this stuff when I was growing up. I ended up getting this idea that I was a bad person and there was something very wrong with me. I didn't deserve love or appreciation or respect. And this is all from growing up with her.
Okay, so you moved back in with her when, in 2016? And was that a choice? Like, how did you go back to her?
Well, she was, like I mentioned before, she was barraging me with these very uh,
Uh,
very guilty messages about, my father was, she's saying like, oh, he's deteriorating. She's saying, I'm going to kill him. Um, and this was after he had a fall, I think in like 15 or so. And that's after his symptoms started. So she was barraging me with these messages constantly, calling me on the phone. And at the same time, I was starting this job in New York City in 16, and it kind of just like made sense logistically to be closer for work. And I thought, okay, I can also keep an eye on what's going on, and hopefully now, being more mature and mindful, I can like keep a emotional distance from her. But what can I say? I never should have moved back with her or had anything to do with her.
what happened when you moved back? How long did you stay? I mean, I assume it just the whole thing started over again.
You know, at the time, there was this gentleman who was in and out, George, who was her like on again, off again, abusive, alcoholic boyfriend. And he was like helping with my father. So I was basically, shopping, cleaning. I'd help with my dad's hygiene, and I was also going to work full time. So it was pretty. It was really hands on for a while. I think the stresses of it all eventually did get to me. I ended up resigning from that job so I could focus more on my father and managing the household.
And
But
then you're not earning money, so you can't leave.
exactly. So
And where was Ethan? Where was your brother at the time? Did he move back as well?
he was out still. He was struggling as well, and I think he eventually did come back, and he was living there for a time up until the point that George one night attacked him, and he ended up leaving and like getting an Airbnb, and that was it. He didn't come back. It had been a struggle for him too for many years, trying to find his footing.
Where is he now? Where's Ethan now?
We're living together,
Oh,
so
yeah.
we've been living together the last 4 years. Yeah, we took care of my father together, the two of us, for 3 years, from the time that mom was removed from the situation up until the time he passed, and we were there by his bedside when he passed away.
Wow.
So it was quite a saga.
And you guys, so you got your mother and your father, and then this George dude came with.
Yeah, it's just it's
I
completely
get
harebrained.
it though. I get you get in these structures and these systems, and you get what's
You
the
know, I'll admit to some hubris. I really thought that, okay, I'm older now. I understand this dynamic. If I can just, I feel like I can be the adult in the room and control this. And you know what? That's kind of what it ended up being. And as things degraded
yeah,
and the level of alcohol abuse stepped up, I mean, who was I kidding?
yeah,
To be a parent to three grown ass adults, two of them who could like take one of the cars and go out and drive to get booze. Like I couldn't control these people. It was crazy to think I could, but
and so how did you get your dad out of the house and away from your mom so that you and Ethan ended up taking care of him?
oh gosh. No, we got in this fight, and I ended up sleeping over at my then partner's house. And my mother leaves me these voice messages that morning where you can hear her slapping my father, and he's like, "Help, help." And I decided I'd had enough. I'd been recording her for months, audio recordings, because she was just degrading psychologically and going on these insane rants for hours, calling me the worst things in the world, saying she's going to kill me with her mind. And I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do at that point. I was scared to even be around her. She'd be walking up the stairs with like a scissor in her hand, and I'd hear the thud, like thud, thud, thud of her coming up, and I'd be like, "What the hell is happening?" So I was scared shitless. And after that whole fight happened between us, and she left those voicemails, I said, enough, enough. So I reported it to it was some kind of like domestic abuse support network, and they reported it to police. She was arrested the same night. Yeah, and they charged her with abuse and neglect of a vulnerable adult, uh, and domestic assault. They barred her from coming back to the house. Basically, they put her under these things called court-ordered conditions of release. So it really barred her from even coming back to the residence or having contact with me or my father. But I still remember this. I come back to the house with my then partner, and we think, okay, nobody's here. And there was just like this eerie vibe of everything that had just taken place. I was in disbelief. She'd even been arrested. And we go into the bedroom, and I'm looking around. I'm thinking, that's weird. Like there's a sheet on the floor. I don't remember that being like that earlier. And then behind me, the closet door just swings open, and she's sitting there on her laptop smoking a cigarette. And I'm like, oh, it scared the shit out of me. And my partner immediately runs to call the police because she's not supposed to even be there. And gosh, she ended up getting dragged away by state troopers again. Not before threatening to fucking murder my ass. She got an additional charge for that, criminal threatening. But yeah, it broke my heart. It really it broke my heart.
It broke your heart. How so?
Just seeing the state she was in, she didn't seem good. She claimed to me, and that I later found out was a lie, that she'd walked all the way there. She got a ride from someone. But she told me, "Oh, I walked here from town. I'm dying. I'm having a heart attack. I'm so sick." All I can think is she was tugging these heartstrings that she planted in me from when I was a kid, because it broke me. And what do I do? Like, this is somebody who just threatened to murder me. I run to get her medication. I give her $1,000 cash, her cards, everything she might need. I give it to her. I'm crying with the police. Please take care of her. Like, I feel like I was acting like an abused spouse or something. And she gets dragged away while she's threatening to kill me. And I cried for the next 3 hours. That was the night Ethan came in with his partner, because I was like, I'm in a spot here. We need to take care of our father somehow. Um, yeah, that was just an awful, awful turn of events. And when I stopped crying?
When?
When she left me about 9 voicemails from some hotel that she ended up in, essentially threatening to sue me, to send lawyers after me, to saying, throw Jonathan in a nursing home. You don't want some nurse walking around in there. Saying she's going to sell the house to throw me out. Just nonstop threats, saying, "Oh, you have to bring me a car. You have to bring me my things." Just when I heard those, I realized, oh, she was bullshitting me the whole time. She's just, and that's kind of just been the cycle the whole time I've known her.
Yeah.
She plays this very sick adult individual, but she's a snake. It's her above everyone else. Life is a war, and she's number one. And she showed no remorse or accountability in literally abusing and beating a dying man. or selling out her own children. And you know what? As a result, she's going to die alone. It's what she deserves. That was the breaking point.
David, I have a question.
Yeah,
Some people who grow up in abusive households become abusers.
yeah.
It doesn't sound like that's you. So I'm curious if you have any insight into why you ended up as you did. And
Hmm.
you could have become your mother. Though she also seems sort of delusional and you don't. So there may be that component playing into her horrible treatment of her family or people in general.
You ever hear the proverb, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth?
No, but that is an amazing proverb.
It's one of my favorites. I think what you're asking might be the most common case. And cases like mine are probably in the minority. I mean, generally speaking, these struggles are the results of intergenerational trauma that go far beyond when you were born. And I can confirm that of my story too. I mean, my grandmother on the mother's side survived the Holocaust. She watched her own parents killed in front of her by um, Nazi sympathizers, survived as an orphan and came here. But I can only imagine that trauma she bore inside because who'd she give birth to? My uncle,
Right.
who he was alone at the end of his life, no next of kin, a hoarder, and my mother. So these people both had immense psychological difficulties just being like adults in this world. And lo and behold, Ethan and I come from the relationship of her and my father, who also struggled with a lot of trauma growing up. So to get back to your question, I think at a point, and maybe this started with me going to therapy, but just when I was able to conceptualize that what I was going through was just extremely abnormal and that I'd suffered incredible abuses and injustices, I was able to remove myself from that situation and come to a better understanding that, okay, I'm suffering from the impacts of this thing. I feel the pains, the sorrow, the trauma. I'm suffering with the insecurities, the lack of trust in others. But this isn't me. I'm not this trauma that I embody. And it takes years and years of just encountering other people, having healthier relationships, and kind of just like being able to navigate life with this mindfulness that you maybe just can't trust what your body's telling you sometimes because you have this background. Because you know what? I've seen parents that are good parents by definition. They care for their children. They're invested in them. They want them to succeed in this world, whatever that means for them. And then you have parents like mine, and they're kind of negative role models. They're what not to be, what not to do. And that's how I look at my parents. Do I empathize with them, having had their own struggles and, you know,
But
being that,
how
that
did you not absorb? How did you not absorb that behavior? Like, how did you not become that? You just didn't. I mean, you're just too different, maybe.
there
Uh,
are points where if certain things didn't happen, I might have. And I think about this sometimes. I mean, back in junior high, when a lot of the trauma was happening, and I was witnessing my mother abusing inhalation anesthetic every day, I was getting bullied horribly at school. I was isolated. I didn't really have any friends. And I remember those days I would dream a lot about shooting up the school. And, when I see all these headlines today, I think, well, I understand how somebody comes to that place emotionally.
oh,
It's a place of just great disenfranchisement and pain and anger and loneliness. But I guess the ability to have that empathy is really the difference of why I didn't become that anger, why I didn't become that rage and that kind of vitriol that my mother still embodies to this day. I couldn't bear it. After what she'd put me through, and understanding how she had hurt me, I thought, okay, there's no way in hell I'm going to put someone else through that shit. And that's actually informed my decision not to have children as well.
I was going to
I,
ask you that. Yeah, you decided not to have children.
yeah,
Your
because,
wife's obviously on board with that.
yeah, and you know what? You can have any number of perspectives with this. I'm sure a lot of people might think what I used to hope for, which is, oh, I'll be the parent I never had. But I realized, you know what? That's not really for the kids' sake. It's not. I mean, you're just hoping to live through them vicariously. And I thought, I can't even chance that. And maybe it's sad in a light, but if I were going to do such a thing, I'd want there to be a world for this kid to grow up in where they can feel held and loved and appreciated in this world. And I didn't get any of that, and I don't see things getting better.
In the world or with you? I mean, in the world outside of you? You mean our
Both.
political,
Oh, everything. I
everything
mean,
landscape? Yeah.
just it's terrifying, and it's getting more terrifying every day. And
Is
I'd be scared, you know. Um, I think I would genuinely struggle with not walking my mother's footsteps because the reality is when you're raised like that, you don't have an example to go off of for parenting. You have this example in your head and your body that you hold of somebody who invalidated you at every step, domineered you, tried to hamstring you, and
yeah.
how can you really assure that you're not going to act out those same patterns when there's someone this about this tall that is looking up to you?
Yeah. One last question. Your relationship to BPD today, what is it? Like, how do you see yourself today?
Um, there's still a lot of days where I'll go down a spiral and I'll think about just how sad it all is. It's the sorrow of a human life. And I think about being in my father's shoes or my uncle's shoes and my grandmother and just thinking about how much fucking suffering there is in this world and everything I've been through. And it makes me feel like this is hell or something. And it makes me really feel like I don't want to be here. And I guess I don't know what to do with that sometimes, but sit with it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I'm actively suicidal or have been. It's just kind of this world weariness, and that's stuck with me since those days. It's just changed shape,
Mhm.
and don't get me wrong, there's still the same kind of like emptiness inside that I had back then. It's just I feel like it's more I have more of an awareness of where it comes from now. Back then, I felt very internally vacuous, but now there's things I like, there's things I love, there's things I care about. I mean, I love houseplants for one.
No, that's a gorgeous plant.
Thanks. It's a monster. But
People.
how do I see myself?
Yeah.
Oh dear. I'm food for worms.
Your food for worms.
I was then, I am now, but you know what? While I'm still here, while I still draw breath, I would like to leave this world a better place than I found it. And I see myself and what I suffered and what it made of me, what I just struggle with and still do. And I see a world full of people like that. There's nothing that special about me or the trauma I experienced. It's a hard world, and there's a lot of parents out there who probably shouldn't have kids like mine, but we're here and we have to make the best of it.